We are living in a very important time in the divine program where we are and have received that still small voice, the voice of the Holy Spirit through his angel messenger, which, with that voice, has called us, has gathered us, and we have been placed in the age of the cornerstone. And in this fourth stage of that restoration of the three bride, which began there in Luther, then Wesley, it would be the second, then Pentecost, Laodicea, and the fourth, the age of the cornerstone. In the time of Elijah, first Elijah heard a great and strong wind. Brother William writes that there in the message, what does thou hear? And he writes there in the pyramid, I'm going to tell you what he writes, and then I'm going to read to you what Brother Branham spoke on that occasion. He writes, in the first stage of that three bride restoration, in the Luther part and stage, he writes, the great and strong wind. In the second, which would be the Wesleyan stage, the stage of Wesley, he writes, earthquake. In the third, he writes, fire. In all those stages, Elijah went out to see, but the Lord wasn't there. But when he went out, already in the fourth stage, when he hears that voice, that still small voice, God was there. That is typified in the most holy place of the spiritual temple of Christ, which is the stage and age that each one of us has been alluded to live in, because he is no longer in the stages of the holy place, but rather he is in the most holy place. In that message that I am reading, in those writings that he wrote inside that pyramid, he drew and wrote those stages. He tells us on that page 11 of this book, he says, Elijah waited, yet he was a prophet, but he listened to it. He never went out to compare revivals with them. He never went out to get the biggest tent in the country. He never went out to go on television or so forth, as we would call it. All the great fuss, and America is guilty of listening to those noises. Oh, we love noise. But God is not in the noise. Although as honorable and things as they are, yet God isn't in noise. When I read that previous paragraph that talks about Elijah and all that, you should read page 10 so you can see how he was speaking. So you know what Brother Branham was speaking about, because I did not want to read to you that much. It says there of what Brother Branham speaks, but it's good for you to read it so you have the whole picture of what Brother Branham was talking about. He continues saying, he goes to say, all the great fuss, and America is guilty of listening to those noises. Oh, we love noise. I am repeating again what I read to you. But God is not in the noise. Although as honorable and things as they are, yet God isn't in noise. If that would have been so, when the Africans beat the tom-toms, you never heard such a noise and rhythm. God wasn't in it. And we've had Russian Mighty Wings, and he wrote number 1 in Mighty Wings. We had all kinds of fires. and he writes 3. And earthquakes, he reads 3 again. That's the third stage. And shakings and great revivals and things like that. God wasn't in it. If it had been, it would show itself up. But after that, of the first, second, and third pull, came a still small voice. And he writes, small voice. Then God was in the voice. Notice how beautiful that is. Then God was in the voice. Now, you remember in one part in the book of quotations, he speaks where he says that there will come a time when the voice will come forth through the speakers, something like that. In other words, that voice in this end time, in the age of the cornerstone, as it is represented there in that voice of the still small voice that appeared in that fourth manifestation, after the great and strong wind, after the earthquake, after the fire, and that voice appeared in that still small voice. It is that voice that in the third pull will be manifested already in its stage, in the final part, in the peak part of the fulfillment of the 10th vision. And that will be starting as something simple. And then it will reach a stage where the manifestation of the power of God in all of its fullness will be there, in that place that Brother Branham saw as a little wooden room. Something will be moving, that voice of that still small voice will be there, being manifested. That voice of the still small voice has been since the beginning of our age, of the age of the cornerstone, in the angel of the Lord Jesus Christ, William Soto Santiago, who, in his manifestation of that angel who was different from the rest, began to call with a great voice of a trumpet and gather together all the elect, with that still small voice, within that stage where he would be fulfilling his coming. He continues to say, but after that, come a still small voice. And he writes, small voice. Then God was in the voice. That's what I'm thinking today, friends. We people are so carried away with all the noise. So America loves noise. Looky what they doing. They turn on those old radios just as hard as they can with rock and roll and boogie woogie. And Brother William writes, America loves noise. And rock and roll and boogie woogie and all that kind of stuff, they got to have it so loud it blasts your eardrums out, nearly all the noise, all the time of the day. And in the church, we beat the tambourines, we run up and down and scream and hollered and whooped and had a great time like that. Nothing against it, but where was God in it? What did he do? Broke us up in little pieces, called the Assemblies of God, the Church of God, the Pentecostal United Oneness, all these other different little denominations. God wasn't in it. It's a forerunner of God. It's a framework. When you see so-called Christianity today, people that goes to church and lives their dignified lives and goes out and denies healing and denies the power of God and denies a consecrated life, calling you fanatics, remember, that's a framework. That's Brother Wood. I believe you call it scaffold work. It's a bogus. It's a frame that goes on the outside. God only stands on it to build the building. Glory to God. It's only a bogus frame that'll be torn down. And at this time, we have to be as Elijah was there in that encounter he had with the Lord, in that voice of that still small voice where there was no noise. In other words, it is the fulfillment of that silence that there was in heaven, that all the angels, seraphims, cherubims, they stopped playing, praising, glorifying with the opening of the seventh seal there in heaven. There was silence, deadly silence, but something was unfolding on earth. And that mystery is something that was not written. John was forbidden to write. Even they told him, the angel told him, when Brother Branham speaks of that, he says, John, seal up and leave that. They would stumble over that. Many of those scriptures were partially fulfilled, but now in this time they will be fulfilled in all of their fullness. In other words, the opening of the seventh seal in heaven would be marking a stage in the midst of the church which Christianity wouldn't know. Even the very elect would be living day by day that fulfillment while God was unfolding and developing everything, that seventh seal here on earth, that fulfillment of his coming in that final stage would be fulfilled in the midst of the church of the Lord. In a greeting that I will send maybe on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday's activity, there we will talk in details about the explosions of the seventh seal, because there is a place where he wrote certain things that perhaps we have seen in the messages, but there he writes in a clearer way, in which, as well as other writings that we have read, have helped us greatly to understand this stage in which we are living, a stage that we assume with reverence, with fear, with gratitude to God, that he in his mercy has left all this at the disposal of the elect of God, so that faith may come in this end time of each one of us, the perfect faith, so that soon we may be transformed. In other words, those explosions of the seventh seal, as it says there, that the third pull in paragraph 1057 of the book of quotations, where it says, the third stage would be for the wise virgins, for the church, which are the foolish, for the lost, and also for the 144,000. In other words, at this time, those explosions would be marked more clearly, and the impact that those explosions of the seven seals were going to have on each one of the human beings that would be living in this end time, which would be in the framework of each one in the group that corresponds to them. That is why we cannot be with discussions or discord or with debating the word with anyone, because not all are chosen. In other words, some are chosen for the rapture, some are chosen to go through the great tribulation, the foolish, others are chosen to be unbelievers, and others are chosen to be Hebrews, 144,000. For each group, there are chosen ones that complement that group that corresponds to that person. That is why we cannot get into arguments with anyone. And what we do, well, we try that the person who doesn't understand pray to God. They pray to God so that God may open his understanding. And those who are already publicly or already speaking against, ask God to have mercy on them, because they would be entering in the part of crossing the line. And that is already dangerous because their name can be erased or blotted out. And one may say, one may ask, but who are you to be saying that a person is a foolish or a chosen one? Well, by the works. Because a chosen of God, a child of God, would be hand on hand with the divine program for each age, for each dispensation. And if he doesn't understand something, he keeps quiet and prays to God. And God opens his understanding. And Brother William would tell us, what you don't understand now, when you're transformed, then we will understand everything. And we will have there both consciences together. And God would open the whole picture for us. Things that perhaps we are not going to understand while we are in these bodies, because God would have reserved that until we are transformed. And when we are transformed, we will already know everything. There will always be something that God will reserve for himself in the midst of the people, so that imitations don't arise, such as the full fulfillment of the 10th vision. There is a secret there that only the instrument that God will have, that God will be working through him, will know. And that doesn't have to be known by the elect, you see? If he doesn't understand something about how things will be happening, what he does is pray. He is not going to criticize, to say, that is not the way it is. I don't believe that, because that is not the way it is. No. The elect will start praying. The chosen will start praying to God. If I don't understand this, then I will start praying, and God, you in your divine plans for me will open my understanding. See? Now, that foolish virgin is a person that is already in that manufactured line, that they criticize everything. They question everything. And there will come a time when we will know which group each person belongs to. And each person will know which group they will belong to. The best thing a person who knows that he is going to go through the Great Tribulation is to be hand in hand with the chosen ones. He already said that years ago. And he said, the best thing a person can do is to be hand on hand and work together with the group that knows that is going to leave, not to be against it. And that is a biblical truth, both in the sacred scriptures as in the messages of Brother Branham, as well as in the messages of Brother William. And we cannot deny it. It is a reality that hurts us in our soul, because they are brethren that God has called as well. That is why the seventh seal impacts all those groups. That is why it says, gather all things together, and at the time of harvest, in other words, when everything is gathered in, everything that is in the field is gathered together. But then that segregation is made. In other words, with the same message that the chosen ones are called, there the foolish enter, the manufactured ones, there the unbelievers enter. There they all enter. The unbeliever leaves quickly. He doesn't believe from the beginning. But there is a group that remains there until the end. And in this time is when that segregation of who is going to be raptured and who is not is being made. And each one is already identified himself in which group belongs to him. So this is a time in which we have to be realistic. We have to look already in this time with a mentality, with those eyes of the faith, with an open mentality, knowing that it is already a decisive time. It is the time where each one of us will receive what we are fighting for. If you fight for transformation, you are going to be a fighter for transformation. If you're a fighter to enter the Great Tribulation, believe me, there is no one who will cover up that fact that he is going to enter the Great Tribulation. In other words, it is already a time to speak and to see face to face what God is and will be fulfilling in the midst of His church. So let us be prepared. And again, I repeat to you, not only to you that I am speaking to, but to all who will be listening. What you don't understand now, better pray to God, so that God will then open your understanding And if it's not in this body, in the other, to understand all that God is doing at this time. Many were thinking, when I see that He is coming, that He is going to speak to us about the plagues, the vials, and the trumpets, when Brother William comes back, then I will believe. Because the way that is being fulfilled, I don't believe it in that way. That is not so. Well, when Brother William comes with the saints, it is already for us to see them and be transformed. In other words, I am already telling you here something very important. And when He comes, as Jesus came there, when He went to hell, passed through Abraham's bosom, and came here and appeared to many after His resurrection, that same event will be taking place in this end time. It is already a time where the whole divine program was carried out, and then they waited there in the upper room to receive the first fruits of the Spirit. In other words, waiting for Brother William is already to be transformed. It is not a time, nor is something fulfilled, for we would then be believing in reincarnation, and that is not so. God in every age and in every dispensation, when God takes a messenger and wants and desires to send the ministerial spirit that was in him, what He does is that He sends him with another person, another veil of flesh. So it has been from age to age and from dispensation to dispensation. It has always been God sending the ministry that He had in a prophet that He had already sent. When He sent Elisha, the second portion of Elijah, He did not send Elijah this by. He sent another veil of flesh named Elisha, but with the ministerial spirit of Elijah. When John the Baptist came, Elijah didn't come in his body that appeared hundreds of years ago, but he came in another veil of flesh. And at this time, we did not imagine that Brother William was leaving, but God, in His program, when Moses there changed it, that we are also going to already found a place that besides Him speaking it to me and speaking it in the place where He expressed Himself, when a person said that was in the program, and Brother William said that was not in the program. And there is a writing that I found that he already says something that supports that also. Moses broke the divine program because of his temperament. Did you see? So God at this time, it wasn't for Brother William to go away, because the second coming wasn't to be crucified. It was rather for him to fulfill the manifestation of Revelation 11, where at the end of those ministries, he is killed. But there God then changed. Let's say change, because it is not as he already had it in his program, but he had to then bring the messenger, the message of the age of the cornerstone, as it was already sealed in the heart of that prophet, to make it known. And in making it known, everything he spoke of referred to him. Even all the fulfillment, everything completely. You listen and you will see that one says, well, it is Brother William who is going to be there doing that. Of course it is him. But when Moses changed the divine program there, that final part, then it becomes a mystery that as it is being fulfilled, that is where we see how God had that program. And one would think, well, then he missed that stage. In other words, was God not going to see it coming? That the end was going to be like this? God is omnipotent, omniscient. He knew all this since before the foundation of the world. He already had that, let us say, resolved. He was always going to fulfill that third pool, the fulfillment of the 10th vision and all of that, because he already had the way he was going to fulfill after Moses made that change of the divine program there by striking the rock. He already had that provision in this end time, where he would fulfill that which he had promised, that the pillar of fire would be in the midst of the church of the Lord in the age of the cornerstone. in the summit, where the pillar of fire would be in a great tent cathedral in a little wooden room and would give there the rapturing and transformation faith. God already had all that in his program, already provided, already resolved what was going to be that end of the divine program. But the way in which God would be fulfilling it was the way in which each one of the chosen of God would have to look behind the veil. They would have to look at the most holy place and see inside the most holy place behind the veil those two cherubims of the Temple of Solomon, made of olive wood covered with gold. Wood represents humanity, and gold represents always divinity. In other words, it would be through a veil of flesh in which God would be fulfilling that final part of the seventh seal, where the explosions would be manifested for the last group, upon which those explosions that were reflected there in that rocket launched into the air would impact. But all of this leads to an entails a series of prophetic events in which, as they are being fulfilled, one understands the reason for everything that is happening at this time. And it will be in such a simple but simple way that he said. And now one understands why he would say, if we don't watch, it will pass over us. Because it will be in such a simple and simple way that many times we can say, but how is God going to fulfill that culmination in that way? The God who can do something pompous, glorious, but God is like that. The God creator of the heavens and the earth, creator of the universe, has been pleased to fulfill in a simplicity the culmination of his program. And notice, if it is so great what God is going to do, that he's going to take away the kingdom of darkness, the kingdom of the Gentiles, from the beast in a simple way. In other words, God's power is so great that even with a straw, with a little wind, he can make a, let us say, a revolution. And notice that with the still small voice, with that spoken word, with the fulfillment of Mark chapter 11, where it says, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, look how he compares it. If you only have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. And mountains represents a kingdom. In other words, by the spoken word, under the ministry that God would have in this end time, he will tell the kingdom of the Gentiles to be moved, to be removed. That this atomic wind will undo every kingdom, every ruler, to leave the presence of God, for God to establish the glorious kingdom of the Messiah Prince, which will be established in the millennium and then to reign for all eternity. In other words, what God is going to do is so great that it would be of stumbling even for the very elect. That is, but they will not stumble. They will believe, and what they don't understand, they will say, Lord, I don't really understand this, but I believe because it is the pillar of fire that is working at this time. And I believe it with all my heart because I want to be changed. I want to obtain that rapturing faith. And he will grab on to the word. He will grab on to the message. He will take hold of everything that is being spoken through that still small voice, that final still small voice, which there will not be those noises of those previous stages, Luther's, Wesley's, and Brother Branham's. But it will be in that stage of quietness, without much commotion, where only the voice of God will be heard. The voice of those seven thunders, which will be given the rapturing faith, the faith of transformation. We are living in this very important time that we have no words to express God for the mercy so great that he had for each one of us, and that he has removed the veil from the front and has allowed us to see and look into the most holy place and to see all the work that he's carrying out in there. I ask you to pray much for our brother Miguel. Pray much for myself. Pray much for the ministers. Pray much for one another. Love one another. And God will continue to bless us. And God will bless us. As our brother Branham says in A Words to the Bride. May God bless you. May God keep you. Forgive me, unable, for taking a little more time in this talk we have had, talking about all these promises and all that God is doing at this time in such a simple way, and aware that the glory and honor belongs to the Lord. We are His instruments, that we place ourselves in His hand and say, Lord, here I am, here I am. Use me as you wish to use me. Because the glory, all of it, in the age of the cornerstone, is the Lord's, it is His. The glory is what is going to be seen there in that manifestation when people go out being healed. And there will be no one who will take the glory, but God is the one who takes it. And we, when we receive that healing of the body, that complete healing where we will no longer have disease in our bodies, but it will be an eternal body, that eternal healing, there the glory is that of the Lord. There we will give Him the glory, because those theophanies, those glories that will come to our bodies and will transform us, will be those theophanies, those glories that will come to our bodies and will transform us. In other words, it will always be the glory of God that takes the glory. Glory to glory. In other words, God is the one who takes His glory, His own glory. May God bless you. May God keep you. Thank you very much for this opportunity that you allow me to greet you and send these words of greeting to all of you. God bless you and God keep you. Thank you very much, Aníbal, for this opportunity to greet you.